Evening.
Evening.
Yeah, yeah. So the
Second
new,
time round.
the latest life developments for me, which are top of mind for obvious reasons. Well, there's a few things. There's one COVID data thing I saw, which I need to look into more. There's working on rocket nozzles at work for a steam engine, which is fun. And the girl I'd gone on a couple of dates with got cold feet about getting into a relationship with a guy who already has a son and still has his ex somewhat in the picture because of that, and who has some level of negative emotion or anger towards his ex because reasons that feel rather justified. And so my emotions have been all up and down, even though on the surface, because I'm used to keeping things hidden, it's been all smooth. So, yeah.
Oh, that's reassuring. So fear of commitment.
I don't
Very-
not fear of commitment per se, but fear of suddenly being lumped with a 6-year old, I think, and a potentially combative someone else. And I can't really argue against that. And if that's the feeling
That's
at
sort
this
of dead
stage,
in the water at this point. Then
sorry.
is that sort of dead in the water at this point?
Yeah, yeah, she'd talked to her mum and grandma about it, and oh, go away, little notification. Oh, there's a little notification about sending a personalized Nitro gift that'll be picked up on the recording, but oh well. We use Discord. Whoa, big surprise.
Yeah, yeah. Those
Um,
advertisements were really annoying.
yeah, but I think part of it is like in the Philippines where she grew up and where she was for this conversation. Divorce is not a thing in the law, and similar in the culture. And so the idea of a divorced man with a son, it's like, ugh, I think. And as opposed to in New Zealand, it's a much more accepted thing.
Hmm.
So I think that contributed substantially to the negative feeling towards that, and then rationalizations and logic on top of that. But I've been through a few cycles of response to that. Like, that's sad, it's logical, I can understand that, and I can't really debate it. But at the same time, there's the emotional response of a sense of loss and betrayal, which is like logic and emotion are not in the same processor mentally. So take each on its, yeah.
Hmm. I think this is more rationalization than rational reason,
Yeah,
personally.
yeah, like the,
I can say for a culture to be having no divorce in the law and that being frowned upon for a man to be having had a divorce and have a child, it's also going to be quite frowned upon for you to be 30, 32 and not have a partner at all in her circumstance.
yeah,
It's well and good to choose one side of the equation and not the other.
yeah. Well, she was commenting about wanting someone without so much baggage, and I'm like, I think my baggage is reasonably well handled, as much as could be reasonably expected. I hope she finds who she's looking for, but I fear, yeah,
Yeah, I would be concerned about her in that regard as well.
yeah.
I can understand that to a certain degree, but chances for real connections don't come along all the time.
Hmm.
I think if you, I was thinking this earlier, in modern dating, we all look for reasons why it won't work. with the other person. And there's always a reason.
Mm.
You can always find something about someone that means you should probably not be involved with them.
Mm.
Now, some reasons are more important than others, obviously, but literally no one is perfect. And if you go into your dating life assuming I need to find a person with no flaws or no downsides, you'll find no one.
Mm. Yeah, I think that we could have made it work with the solid commitment to that from both sides. And
Yeah.
if the place that she's at mentally and emotionally and spiritually, because it's got those dimensions as well, isn't one where she can commit to the struggle, then I don't think it would work when those inevitable struggles are faced. But
I think that's right, to be honest, because what you need more than anything else is someone who is willing to accept responsibility.
mm,
You're looking for a woman who wants the family life.
mm,
And I think most likely she doesn't.
mm. She did discuss that a little bit in the sense of she said that she'd love to build something with me, and she loved the one of the visions I sketched out of a house in the country with a garden and kids running around and so on. But that she would want to build that with me, and I think that on the one hand, I think we could work really well together if we worked through worked through the inevitable issues and so on with the commitment. I think that it could work, but at the same time, this was a reason that it broke apart this early, and
which is good.
better earlier than later, yes, although I
Well,
tend
obviously,
to,
you would rather say not at
well,
all, but
yeah, yeah, I tend to, I think, emotionally commit earlier than would be wise, but it's like go all in and fight and then be heartbroken when it fails and then go all in and fight.
for some comfort in that, I'd say she probably did too.
Yeah.
I don't think that your vision of her walking away being happy and rosy about this, I'm not saying that is, but that's not
Mm.
going to be correct.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
going to be struggling herself. And she'll never forget you. I can
Mm.
say that much.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what you need is someone who wants to commit.
Yeah.
That's what is required. You need someone who has that kind of, well, adult mindset, who isn't being idealistic, who's being realistic.
Who's ready to sit down and knuckle through the
Yeah,
issues that I have.
because she is, from what I can tell, quite an idealistic person.
And her, as far as I can tell, the responsibility that she's taken on a lot of responsibility, but it's responsibility of being a nurse and taking care of people like that and taking care of friends, but not the
self-serving responsibility.
Yeah, it feels harsh to say that, but I don't think it's inaccurate.
I'm sure there's a nicer way to say it, but I think that I don't mean that directly for her. I mean that as sort of a criticism of careerism.
Mm,
You should go out and work really hard so you can have a good job, and if it could help other people too, that'd be good. It's like, yeah,
yeah.
okay, you are making all kinds of sacrifices there, but they're not really to help other people. The
Mm,
nurse wouldn't be going to the hospital if she wasn't being paid.
mm,
End of story. And they do strikes regularly, which is a great example of how money is actually kind of more important to them than helping people. Now,
I think
obviously, I know they strike for other
it's
things
more
than money
complicated
a
than
lot of
that.
the time. Yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
but
Mm.
that's always part of it.
Money is definitely an
Yeah,
important
yeah,
thing. It can't be just ignored.
yeah,
Yeah.
and obviously that's valuable. You need that in your life.
Mm.
I don't want to denigrate the girl. I think
No, no, no. I think
she she could slightly running out of time have a great life and find a great person, but I think there's a little bit of, I don't know.
yeah. The way I've conceived of it is that I've in my life so far sought to take on responsibility in an almost pathological way.
Mm.
And I've been working my way towards a more balanced approach to that. She's traveled and sought adventure and good times to a degree that feels less off the far end of the scale than I was, I think. Like, she's traveled, she's taken on the responsibility to achieve her own goals and so on, and the responsibility to family members around her. But it's the other half of the spectrum to where I am in that sense, and there'd need to be some sort of meeting in the middle for it to work. And I don't think it's easy but wrong to say that she was wrong to, or that there's anything wrong with her lifestyle and the pattern of
No,
life that she's established. Like,
no,
that's
no, no. I
her
would
life, her
say,
choice, and so on.
well, from
But
any one
there's,
person's point of view, you could criticize someone else's worldview.
yes.
Um, I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with hers, given that it changes at some point.
Mm,
From what I can tell, if it never does, then it's probably going to produce some problems in her life. But
mm,
these are choices that people make. Some people go that kind of route, and that's all up to them.
yeah, and it's easier to see another's flaws than your own.
Yeah,
And
yeah, well,
so
there's that.
I think it just boils down to there were a lot of great compatibility things between us, which gave a lot of hope for things, but then there were a few key I see it this way, you see it that way type mismatches where it
Yeah,
was just really difficult. And if worked through, that's the sort of thing that can become the great strength of a relationship. But that's a struggle if it's dramatically different. It's like there's
and
a
it
this
doesn't work out every time,
yeah,
as clearly evident.
and the
And this is it's why it's so important to talk
mm,
about your fundamental values
mm,
up front.
yeah,
You know, you both painted a vision for your lives, and you couldn't see a way to have a shared vision
mm,
that you were both happy with. And at that point, it's like, okay, good. Instead of
mm,
like going forth blindly and then ending up in another horrible situation, you did that. You can go, okay. You can shake hands and go, let's go off to our lives again. It was nice to know you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I definitely wish her the best wherever she goes. My emotions are a bit more turbulent than that in some senses. Like, there was something I saw that described the way women deal with big emotions being crying and the way guys deal with big emotions being getting angry.
Yeah, that sounds
And
about right.
that's not
Yeah, women,
saying,
it's being overwhelmed.
yeah, it's a,
Yeah,
I can't deal with this. And the guy goes, rah, and the girl goes, ah. And it's like
yeah,
coping strategy. And so I've noticed that arising in me, which I think I've unlocked or untangled the potential for with my emotional work over the past few months. But yeah, it's the sort of thing you see, you acknowledge, and then let pass. And the
yeah.
positive
It's
that I'm,
there for a reason.
yeah, it is there for a reason. And the positive that I'm focusing on, that I'm taking from it, possibly the wrong term focusing on, but the positive that I'm taking from it is that I don't think I screwed up. It
No, I think you
was,
did
yeah,
everything right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
And it's
so,
certainly been a learning experience.
yeah, yeah. So I can go forward into the future and go to another speed dating event with some degree of confidence that I'm not undateable. I have some
No.
evidence.
Yeah, someone was legitimately interested in you.
Hmm.
And it's just life circumstances that didn't work out.
Hmm.
Yeah, you're going to have an interesting road ahead of you. It's not one that I've ever had to walk down, really. Yeah, not really. You've certainly got a unique set of challenges.
Hmm.
Sorry. All you can do is struggle forward
Yeah.
at the end of the day. You know, we all have these problems in our lives and things we want to do and things that don't work out. And the best bet is always to pick yourself up and try again.
Yeah.
You know,
And
and nothing's going to work the first time.
yeah. And as much as it would be nice to, but I'm still moving forward in other avenues. Like I was looking at a different house to rent today. Like this house has no insulation. Some of the doors have gaps. It leaks a bit in winter wind and
And
so on. And the new house, it's I don't know if it would be known internationally, but do you know Lockwood?
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
like sort of like a log cabin, but
yeah,
the wood is all machined to shape, and then it locks together. So it's solid wood walls that thick type thing, or that thick.
a lot of sheds and saunas and stuff are made out of that.
Mm. Yeah, so this is a house of that construction technique. It shows its age of being a rental for a few years and so on when I had a look at it. But and it's had a little add-on that's not Lockwood. But that add-on's insulated. So it's like, there's some that
Is that
work's gone
hardwood
into
floor?
uh I think it's wood on piles. Probably same as this house.
Okay.
I didn't
I
feel
just wonder if
bumpiness in the floor.
it's, yeah, I'm wondering if it's insulated underneath.
I would expect
Um,
so, because that's for
yeah,
easier to insulate than walls, and the
because yeah,
legal requirements these days.
I lived in an add-on to a house, like an outdoor one once, and it had that kind of construction, but it didn't have insulation under the floor, and it got quite cold on the floor,
Mm,
but then the air in the room was warm.
mm. Yeah, so it's got more storage
It's
space,
good.
more cupboards, and yeah, I'm
It's
moving
good
forward in
that you're
another direction.
aiming up. Yeah, yeah. I was going to
Mm,
say it's good that you've decided to aim up, and it'd be a very good opportunity for organizing your things,
chaos.
get everything in order, what you have for what purpose and why,
Mm,
and having your house presentable.
mm.
You know, this we talked not long ago about your big chaos in there, and you were sort of going, "Oh, it doesn't bother me." Like,
I've
okay,
been
that's
working
cool.
on it
You
a
gonna
little
bring
bit.
around a date to your house?
No.
Yeah, you want your house to be in a place where
Mm,
you'd be proud to show someone, "This is my house.
yeah. Oh, would
It's
I
my
or have
room.
I?
This is my office." Yeah, well, a wood construction house would make things look a lot nicer.
Well, I haven't done it, but it's like I'm becoming aware of the issue, like the potential for it. Made it pretty clear in my head that yeah, I need to work on this a bit. So it's a three-bedroom house, which means there'll be a computer office hobby room, and it'll have room for a couch instead of just a single armchair. And I'll need to buy a fridge, but that won't be a problem. And yeah,
It'd be good.
yeah,
Yeah, aim up and get better in life.
yeah, and it's
I mean, this
even
is the
closer.
struggle that I always have is that I'm in this great situation and I go, oh, I want more, I want to be better, I want to go be a doctor or something.
Yeah,
And then I do the math and I'm like, wow, I have it really good right now. I can't I can't justify I couldn't justify going and becoming a doctor.
mm,
It would be a waste of time and money for
yeah,
where I am right now. And I'm the bottom rung employee, which is annoying because I want to. I think that's why I always end up moving every couple of years. You know, I had this drive of like, okay, what's next? Next thing, done that. But I have to sit still here for the next 20 years. So that's going to be great fun.
Yeah.
Assuming it works out.
Yeah, it's funny.
See where this goes in 20 years. You reckon we'll still be doing this in 20 years? Where do you see yourself in 20 years?
Personally, well, a wife. These days, that term is a bit more nebulous than previously, but a wife is part of that vision.
An actual wife?
Yeah. Like, oh,
So you want to be
yeah.
sole income providing? Is that your idea?
I don't know about want that particular thing. I would be happy to be, and I think that I have the potential to fulfill that, but I would be happy with her working some component of the time. Like, I don't want to. She's not locked in the house, and frankly, having 1.5 incomes is nice, but at the same time, like,
It's your preferences here. You
okay. Well, okay, there's two
don't even
aspects to
make what it
preferences.
is.
There's here's what would be nice, and here's how flexible I am around it. Like, this is what I want, and I have no flexibility on it. Is a very different thing to this or anything within here.
Ideal.
Yeah.
Right. If things go your way.
Ideal. Yeah, work 40 hours. Come home to
Boy, that'd be nice.
happy children and a happy wife, and go on some holidays on some relatively regular basis. Like, I don't do that now, and I'm like, that's a gap. I think I should do that, but it's a bit tricky to organise now. Fulfilling work, and I think I've got that box ticked, and they'll give me as many hours as I want. So, like, the boss's attitude is it's better to fail fast than slow, in the sense of work all the hours you want, get the job done as fast as you want, and if it fails, then, well, we found that out sooner, because some costs are fixed by time.
Do
Yeah.
hope they're paying you.
Yeah, it's a good wage.
That's good. Yeah.
Well, it
Because
was.
I remember it was option like you were choosing not to be paid for a while.
I'm working a fixed number. I'm salaried
right.
a fixed number of hours a week.
Oh, you're on. Okay, so there you go. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's my situation.
I'm at the office more than that.
Yeah.
By a factor of 2 to 3.
Mine isn't that far out, but yeah, we're long weeks.
Yeah, but in terms of wages, when deciding the wages, we looked at, okay, what's the average wage for an engineer who's had this many years of industry experience? Oh, okay, we'll pay you that. And the wage going forward will be pinned to the living wage, not just inflation adjusted, but the estimate of how much you actually need to live as a baseline. Like, the lowest paid employee in the company gets that, and then there's a grading between that and twice that, I think, based on a formula that was worked out, and it will go to that. That's still sort of in the future, but if you want 100 grand, work 80 hours. You don't need 100 grand to live.
No, but it's nice.
It can be nice, but time is also nice, and camping's nice, and things like that. But
tax is not nice.
Yeah. But yeah, the vision for the future, it's like that's the job side of it, taking care of the career side. Hobbies, I don't think I'll have a shortage of. Like, some level of hobby stuff, which I'm trying to rationalize my amateur radio hobby. Like, I offloaded a pile of stuff to a friend who's also into amateur radio. He builds more stuff himself. So the pile of bits I gave him will be of more use to him. And I'm trying to rationalize it down into 3 potential configurations. One, that radio that puts out 100 watts and a wire outside, so a permanent house installation. Why is my picture gone blurry? Yeah. one mobile running off a battery that puts out 30 watts, and one very mobile that puts out 5 watts, or 2.5 watts, something like that. But those three configurations should cover my bases and then have fun. Yeah, and I think that the relationship side of it is one that's a strong emotional focus for me. Like it's hard to enunciate that though, because so much of it isn't me. I can't define it in advance. I'd like someone who is compatible on uh, the physical attraction level, and yeah, euphemisms, whatever, and someone who has a similar wish to improve, not same level necessarily, but a recognition that it's good to be working up. Someone that's aiming up to some degree at least, and would accept careful and loving criticism and advice. Like, it's not, you're doing this wrong, it's, I've been thinking about this thing, and so on. You work through like that, and there's loving ways to point out issues that your partner has. Like, you did this thing several times, and I've been thinking this about it, and I wanted to discuss this with you, and so on. But someone who would be open to that, not someone whose main hobby is collecting shoes or something silly like that.
Yeah, I feel like that'd be a relatively hard no.
Yeah, or like $2,000 handbags or something. It's like, no,
Yeah,
that
that's not very compatible with you
no,
or
no.
me, frankly. I may love spending money, but I like spending it on me.
Well,
I'm I'm not very big on spending. I'm better gifts, but I don't like it when other people try and spend my money.
mm,
That's a hard line for me.
yeah, like there's there are some things like that that I do have that are like hard nose, but I'm not a very disagreeable person, so they don't get characterized that way in my head. It's almost like that's the things that I filter out by how I act in terms of
Yeah,
I'm thrifty. It's like that will filter out a certain type of woman.
yeah. You just have to work on being tasteful and presentable while also being thrifty.
Well,
Because it is harder. It is surely harder. You look better without the hat, for sure.
well, at least with these. I thought the hat worked without the headphones on. It's like,
No, black shirt, plain, looks great. You got good hair. Don't need to hide it. There's a thing about accessorizing.
hmm,
The more you accessorize in a particular direction, or any direction, I think, the more you tend to attract people who are interested in people who accessorize themselves. Like I think there's a
hmm,
selection effect there.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, the kind of person who is wearing the rings, the watch, the hat,
Hmm.
the nice jacket, the that. Whereas if you dress very plainly, clean black shirt that fits, for example, but you're color coordinated, things aren't ripped, aren't broken, they're clean, they're pressed. That's
Hmm.
presenting yourself rather than presenting the things that you have.
Hmm.
Um, being tasteful is often minimalism, which should definitely appeal to a thrifty person.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that the hat works where you need a hat. I think it's a
Yeah, I
good
mean,
hat for that.
sometimes you need a hat. Yeah,
Yeah. Like to keep the sun out of your eyes or something.
yeah. I do my best not to wear hats. I don't like them so much. Um, and yeah, that doesn't work great sometimes on sunny days on the farm.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Wearing a hat's part of my habitual setup, and It's a hell of an improvement on the last hat, which was probably a decade old and
Yeah,
had the
that
stains
thing
to
was
prove it.
quite funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think this is good that we can sort of bring this sort of life story thing that we've been doing for a wee while to a close.
Mm.
We went on this little journey and we talked about all kinds of problems along the way. And of course, we're still going to talk about our lives and things that happen. But I think it'd be good to just sort of pop that down for a minute. Okay, we had this wee journey. We talked about how you can
Mm.
deal with different things and how you might approach different things. But I think you said it last week. We didn't want it to become the you talk about your relationship show.
Mm. Yeah.
It's all well and good for mates to do that, I suppose, but we're hoping to give people some value, you know. And I
Yeah.
think we have. Like I'm not saying that about,
Try and get cancelled from
but
YouTube.
we don't want to get. Well, that's easy. Um, we don't want to get pigeonholed too much.
Mm.
You know, people I don't know, people end up wandering into places they don't expect themselves to be.
Mm. Yeah. I've got a few topics sitting in my mental left field that I could bring in.
Yeah, I think I'd also just like to say on that before we go off it is everyone will always give advice
Mm.
about relationships, about men, women dynamics, and I'm sure we will. Like I quite like talking about the dynamics of men and women. Um, but it's really, really important to remember that we do not have one singular evolved mating strategy.
Mm.
We have many. And which one is active in which person depends a lot on their life circumstances, the things they've been through.
Yeah.
And it's really important to remember that one thing will not work with all people.
Mm.
Whatever strategy you employ, whatever way you present yourself, be it honestly, as I'm hoping it would be, it's going to have a selection effect on it before you even go into the realm of is it successful or not, and then the odds on top of that of is it successful.
Mm.
And what women select for is highly varied. As men, we forget this because it's not that varied for us.
Mm.
It's a lot less varied for us. You know, you have that thing of women will rate, was it the top 20% of men as average and above in terms of attractiveness. So a whole bunch of people are off the table. But we always forget to mention that that's not common across women, that top bracket for them is very different groups of
Mm.
people, all the way down to personality styles, interests. Some girls like dorky, nerdy dudes.
Mm.
Some girls really don't. And that doesn't mean that one is better than the other.
Mm.
It just depends on who's it selecting for. I think a good example of this is something that's bugged me for years. You listen to any kind of pop music, say some rappers talking about women or the way he treats them or the way he's able to manipulate them, as is generally the case. I had always had pain and concern about how someone who would treat women very poorly and as disposable pleasures would be successful with women. And I think a lot of young men do. They look at this and they go, okay, that's horrible because that man is succeeding and I'm not. And B, that's bad because it makes me think bad things about women in general. But there's a selection effect there. And my bro science reason, explanation for that unifies both halves is women are interested in men that they respect. And a woman who sees herself as trashy, as not valuable, as lowly or promiscuous, in less nice words, isn't going to respect the stand-up gentleman who is being respectful of her because she thinks that she's trash. Why would she respect a guy who says she isn't? At least the people who behave in those horrible ways aren't kneeling before a disgusting woman in her own eyes. I know for a fact that, okay, you say you have a strip club or something like that. The girls at that club will never engage in a relationship with any of the customers, not for rules, but because they look down on them, because they're giving money, time, and attention and investment into these women who hate themselves. But they will end up in relationships with managers or bouncers because they don't invest in them at all. In fact, they profit from them. It's sad and depressing, but the consistency there is that they have respect for the men who respect themselves enough to look at them and go, yeah, no, I'm not committing, I'm not investing at all. I'll use you, sure, because that's what you're good for. And in her mind, she's like, yep, that's me.
It sounds like the woman, what's it? Sounds like looking for compatibility or no agreement between their self-image and someone else's perception of that. It's like the women who want to be treated as queens think they're also awesome and so on. The woman who
Just because they say that doesn't mean they believe it.
that's true, but there are yeah,
I'd say
yeah, it's
on
complicated.
that point, there's two sides of that. There's the sort of trashy women who say that, and very often they aren't interested in anyone who treats them that way because they're not interested in a male who is less than them, and a male who is, you know, sucking up to a relatively trashy woman is 100% contemptible,
Hmm.
desperate, bottom of the barrel kind of guy. And this is the way I've been able to link the two halves of male female behavior is that need to respect the male partner, needing him to be better than she is. And on the virtuous side, male partner who is, say, a virtuous woman, traditionally defined, who knows she is not trashy. She probably doesn't think she's amazing. She probably just thinks she's okay, but she's certainly not that. And then a guy who is being polite and respectful and doing his own life, but also willing to somewhat invest in her. She can respect that. And then that's how you have the bridge between the two. That's the same pattern across both. And it would come a lot down to the self-image of the person. Because obviously there's going to be people who believe they're on either side of that and then behave that way and then likely end up on either side. Nothing's clear and cut and dry, but I think it's a good example of a reminder that there isn't one dating market and there isn't one story or impulse or drive that we're all trying to figure out. It's not one game. There's many games. And that one I tried to join together because it was, always personally bothering me, but I don't think they all do. Perhaps they do. Perhaps they do. But I don't know if they all do.
I'm just thinking of. I went on a bit of a tangent mentally while you were talking, so I missed some of
No,
what you were saying. But
you're right. Everyone does it.
There's the tendency for. What is it? A bunch of patterns. So there's the women tend to marry across and up hierarchies. Men tend to marry across and down, not dramatically, but like a level.
Yeah.
There's also the pattern of the really geeky girl looking at the geeky guy who's looking at the cheerleader who's looking at the jock, and they're all sort of not noticing the one who's actually attracted to them.
Yeah.
But then there's also the, I think, higher testosterone levels lead to a higher rate of female children, I've heard. And I've heard that there's a, what is it? Think of the rich heiress or rich daddy's girl up the top of that side of the hierarchy, and then there'll be many men chasing her, and she looks at them and sees the flaws inherent in that space, and
Yeah.
she'll sometimes go for a downtown guy, as per the song, the uptown girl wanting the downtown guy, because she sees the flaws and weaknesses inherent in the guys who are chasing her, and so her value hierarchy is sort of tipped on its side relative to what those guys are expecting, and so she goes for, like, what was it, the Greatest Showman movie portrayed that as well.
She has a story in which the man who is struggling at the bottom is transcendent to her being at the top. Which is a good story. That's not wrong. As long as she's carefully selecting.
And so you get a bit of a swirling effect within the society.
Trajectory is more important than actual status. Far more important. Interesting that you said that. My understanding is that the wealthier you are, the more likely you are to have male children. Now, perhaps I've got that wrong. I'll need to have a look at that again. But that
worth checking up. Yeah.
That is my, off the top of my head, remembrance is that when you're at the bottom of the hierarchy, you're more likely to have female children, and when you're at the top of the hierarchy, you're more likely to have male, because of that across and up.
Yeah, that's true.
Down scenario. That it's more advantageous for your genes to have female children when you're at the bottom, because they can at least go up. But if you're at the top, it's better to select for male, because women at the top of the hierarchy actually have a hard time finding partners at all, and are more likely to end up not having children.
There's other factors at play that we don't know.
Oh, there'll be thousands. Yeah. There's not a single evolutionary reason for anything. There's always 1,000 and coming together.
But the testosterone thing that I'd associated with approximately linearly with place in the hierarchy, it's like, no, the guy at the top of at least you look in our society, no, the guy at the top of the social hierarchy doesn't usually necessarily have that much. He's not the big manly man.
He's not struggling.
Yeah. He's not fighting.
Yeah.
The middle guy.
You don't fight when you've already won. It's those who are moving up that generally have that trait. And that would make sense, because that would put them further down in some sense.
And if you go for someone who's
lower classes have always been more blokey.
If you go for someone who's moving up, it's like the if you're already up, it can be hard to see the decline, and it can be essentially actively masked. But if you go for someone
Mm,
who's moving up, it's a bet, and it can fail definitely, but it can also succeed.
yeah, I think that's generally what the indication is, or what the interest is there.
Like the one that's moving up in a certain environment is better suited to that environment than the one that's moving down, even if the one that's moving down is higher in the hierarchy. The assumption is that they'd cross over.
I just think it's really important to remember that there isn't one story or one game that we're all playing.
Yeah.
Not, there is many different evolved mating strategies or stories, and then within that you have the individual's places in society and the hierarchy, their upbringing, their family relationships, stresses and traumas in their life is just out into a massive range. The idea that, do this one thing and it
Yeah.
will work. Like, okay, yes, maybe for this one person.
Yeah. Formulaic doesn't work. But I think that we do
Yeah. And if it does,
use
it's not them they fall for. It's not you, it's the formula.
we use strategies of strategies, if that makes sense. Like we have patterns of how to solve problems, patterns of how to
Mm.
develop solutions. And like
Meta
that's
solutions.
come on, focus. Like you don't go into a relationship thinking, here's the solutions to all the problems. You go into it thinking, how am I going to solve the problems? And how am I going to.
If you're successful,
Yeah,
this is how
yeah,
you think. Yes. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
It's not even how am I going to solve the problems, it's how am I going to develop. How am I going to find how to solve the problems? It's that sort of step back. It's like in communication and honesty and a personality and how to approach that and a bit of experience, basically fill in that. And then you meet a person and develop that interaction pattern.
Hmm. I think we need to be a bit more forgiving about what we are when it comes to relationships, and because we're struggling forward, trying to be the best we can.
Mm,
Um, and we have all of these instincts that evolved for like half a dozen different scenarios in our evolution in terms of mating. And they're all conflicting all the time, and we're trying to find the best way forward. You know, as an off the top of head example, we would have been polygamous originally. We would have slowly morphed into a mix, some monogamous relationships, some polygamous within tribe culture, and then over time gone harder and harder to more monogamy, and the polygamous people would have been sort of the explorer types and gone off to other places anyway. And
mm,
it would have just, as we grew, that worked fine until you run into there's no more land to grow to for people. And then all of a sudden you get the killing your neighbors and taking their women scenario, which was a very long time in human history, which is why we have things like Stockholm syndrome.
mm,
It's an evolved defense. And the story was effectively that of, you know, might makes right on the mating thing. He killed my last husband, therefore he is the better man, therefore I'm attracted to him. And these aren't, moral judgments if that's good. That's just what was needed to survive
mm.
evolutionarily. Because if you didn't obey by that story, if you had honor and you held to your previous partner, you'd just be killed. Or your children would be. Something horrible. There was plenty of that for a very long time.
I think that
And
rather than
all
saying,
kinds of stories.
mm,
Sorry, no
I
go.
think rather than saying if you followed that strategy it didn't work, because the honor impulse is definitely present. It's more that the Stockholm syndrome survival mechanism did work, and It's
Yeah,
that's what you're talking about with the conflicting impulses and instincts. Like that, we've got a big
yeah,
hodgepodge of tools, and sometimes some of them are useful.
yes. There isn't one solution. There isn't
Mm.
one result from all of this. The result from all of this is that we're adapted to all of it.
Mm.
Um, and we're trying to just govern ourselves by our modern sensibilities and rules and our modern story, which is in the middle of changing again, which is making things harder.
Mm.
But, I think there was something like 4 different stories over the last half millennium, just as what was culturally seen as the way to engage in courtship changed. And in doing that, changed the things that were considered desirable actions, behaviors, more than attributes. There's no solution, there's only ever trade off. And we need to be more forgiving of human beings because A, our nature is flexible by our own hand and other people's hands. And B, we don't have one nature, we have a couple dozen or far more
Mm.
for all we know. We can adapt to almost anything, and we have, and then we've kept traces of
Mm.
it. And I think this is one of the big problems that people have, where we're all talking about how do we build relationships between men and women, and how do we understand the other sex, and how do we understand ourselves? And the answer is even if you could fully understand the opposite sex or your own during the modern situation, it doesn't mean you understand them at all.
Mm.
It's just in this context, and we change
Mm.
quite a lot.
There was an article that I read recently, was it, about Oswald Spengler, German, so I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but he. So you can line up skeletons of different animals or different plants, different parts of plants side by side and say, oh, most parts of a plant are a modified leaf. Most bones are the same. Most skeletons have the same basic pattern: 2 limbs up top, 2 limbs down below, and you stretch it. You add a few here, you take away a few here. More vertebra for a tail, take those away, so on. You, it's the basics. You can tell it's all descended from the same sort of start, and it's just stretched in different ways. And he applied the same idea of comparative morphology, I think the term is, but line them up and look at the differences to civilizations. And he looked at, okay, they're all different. What's the same? What can we see as the same patterns taking place? And they all had their own age of reason, where religion moved to the background. And they all had their own goals of that age of reason, which by any other civilization or culture's metric were silly goals in many ways. And then he looked forward in the curve. So, okay, let's look at past civilizations and see how they progressed past the point that we appear to be at. And he saw that they would have a second religiosity where the older religious forms that were then changed into the Age of Reason, which is in many ways the same religion with serial numbers filed off and it expressed in non-religious terms, those forms then come back to a prominence, but they're an old ossified form, and so they act as a shelter from the chaos of the certainties of the age breaking down, the age of reason not fulfilling its promises anymore. And then as things decline, new religious forms, in ancient Rome this was Christianity, as the old religion of Jupiter and so on fell in its ossified form, Christianity emerged, and it was new and strange and from the fringes and better suited to the time. But it's what you're saying about there being. We've got a whole bunch of tools and a whole bunch of adaptive strategies sort of lying dormant.
Source.
And sorry?
And a religion in this example is a tool that is a story.
Yeah, yeah. And the
Yeah.
tool was used for the Age of Reason, and then that, well, Age of Reason is like religion of reason in some senses. It's closer to religion than a lot of people would like to say. But
It's a child of it.
yeah, yeah. And the people act the same as the point I'm making. We've all got the same toolkit, and individuals are as highly varied as we've been talking about, but on population level, there's still that sort of about a third of the population end up acting like this in response to this type of stimulus, about a third of the population act like that in response to the same thing, and so on. So you can see, okay, there's the type of cycle we get, and here's the types of responses that are normal. And we can talk about the averages, we can talk about women do this or men do this, and it's like, okay, what do you do? And that's when it gets far, far more complicated, and you just need to form a relationship with an individual and get to know them because.
And this is why you can never forget the transcendent unknown. Is
Mm,
always the religions tell. Like you do not know.
yeah.
You do not know the world. You do not know the structure of existence. It doesn't matter how much you tell yourself you do. You don't.
Mm,
You don't know it. We don't have the source code. We don't know. And we sure as shit don't have the source code for us. And I think that's actually more important than the source code for the universe.
mm. Because
And
we
the
are not
likelihood
ourselves
that
in
we
isolation.
no, the complexity, the
Mm,
emergent phenomenon between human interactions is incalculable. 8 billion to the power of 8 billion recursive. It's not, and recursive forever because we never stop interacting. This is not a mesh that can be predicted.
mm. On an
In
individual
saying
level.
that,
Yeah.
in saying that, it is worth noting that your description before of the age of reason, a rise of a new religion coming out of it, and then it's slowly developing down and having a new age of reason, fits well with my understanding of how information is brought from unconsciousness to conscious.
Mm,
The history of religious ideas book, which I highly recommend everyone read. It will certainly change your view of history and religions, in good ways both. It's really hard to tell which it is, that book. I think I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Human beings learn in stages, and imagery and story is one of the earlier stages. And it is the stage before articulated rational thought. So it is, to my mind, inevitable. You will first have observations of human behavior. You'll then have copycatting, sort of acting out not even religious at that point, just acting out of human behaviors, copying other people. And eventually you have a story come out that explains some of those behaviors and encompasses the previous story. So it is a greater than story. And if you look back on the history of all religious ideas, you can see a progression. There is
mm,
a story across all of the stories we've told forever. There's actually a narrative,
mm.
which is really fascinating.
And it's
The
been
fact, the
embedded
fact that we're in
into
an age of
very
reason.
deep.
This is just how we learn. It
Mm,
just is, and from that action, we start to represent it. That's stories. That's myths. That's religion, and then eventually it becomes to the point of understanding and, well, rational, logical, spoken word thought. It's not
mm,
new, it's not the first time, and it won't be the last. And it doesn't go away during the religious phase. But people are captivated by the religions because they make more sense than anything articulated.
mm,
And then we have this jump where all of a sudden the religion can be articulated, and bam, we take it into our consciousness. It becomes common sense. and then all of a sudden the religious is useless anymore because it's all common sense. We know that anyway.
Hmm.
And then, like you say, a greater form of the religion will sprout out, whatever comes next. And
Yeah.
right now, all we will see it is in the early work of artists. That's all we'll have. And there'll be a great philosopher who comes out at some point and tells a story about the world that's so compelling we can take it as religious. Because there's no other way we can take it, because we can't just take everything as into straight consciousness.
And over hundreds of years, as we wander around culturally,
yeah,
we'll see the guiding light in different directions. And like there was
yeah,
a point I heard recently that older religions, like if you go back 2,000 years, 3,000 years, the idea of nature gods or nature as a god to worship wasn't a thing. Nature was just existence. It was where stuff happened.
It was, yeah, it develops. These ideas develop. You cannot learn something that your mind isn't prepared to accept. We think in the rational world that we can learn anything, and the reality is we can't. You cannot learn things. Like if there was a new idea, a truly new idea, it was, I want to say thousands of years in the making, but literally it's all of human history in the making. Everything builds on everything else, but say for that one specifically, thousands of years of slow development in language and understanding and cultural norms to get to the point where a single person can say it aloud, to conceptualize it even as a religious vision. That has been something that has been in the works and slow evolution of human cultural transmission for thousands of years. And it'll still be a very long time after that first religious vision before it can be spoken as a conscious or articulated point.
Yeah. Certain kinds of thought are impossible until, well, certain kinds of thought are inarticulable until you develop the language to say them. Like, there was
we can go back and talk to cavemans.
Yeah.
Or even early humans who could speak. Forgetting the language barrier, there's a concept barrier. You couldn't teach them anything. You could sit there for your whole lifetime trying to educate a single person. You would fail. You can't just scaffold it up out of nowhere. Take a human being. Oh, now I say that, but you can.
From a child, we do that every generation.
You can't, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm wrong about that.
But it comes packaged for them.
Time, yes, at any point in human history, we could not leapfrog ahead to any other point in human history.
Culturally, yeah.
Or even individually. There could not be a single individual who thought up new things that wasn't something that was created in a distributed fashion. This is what the collective unconscious means, is that your thoughts come from the collective unconscious. They do not come from you. They are not your generations. They are not something that you just magic up. You can't be a creative genius visionary and just come up with all these things out of nothing. You know, there were no Nikola Teslas in the Stone Age. Not even a little bit. You know, there were smart people and they were doing smart things, and that's why there's great artifacts everywhere. But it's not the same thing. Mechanical is almost a bad example. Physics would be better. I don't want to use the example of Jesus, but I think it's honestly the best one. You couldn't have a figure like that a single year earlier than you did. These ideas are developed by humanity, not by individuals. And they evolve until the point where they're close enough between the border of unconsciousness and consciousness that someone can touch on them in a trippy, hallucinogenic vision. And that's religious revelation.
I think the
And then
ground can be
after
fertile for something for a
studying it
while before it
forever,
happens.
yes,
So you could have
yeah,
had Jesus a year earlier, but not a century earlier.
okay, yeah. My point is, yeah, you could have fertile ground for ages before it happens, but you couldn't have it happen without the fertile ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, the conditions had to be right. Maybe you couldn't have had it happen 1,000 years earlier.
Yeah.
Better analogy.
Well, there
Seeing
was
as we're hundreds of thousands of years old.
in that sense, there was one I saw that's like, Kepler's laws of planetary motion. Basically, the fact that a planet orbits not in a circle but in an ellipse, where the center of the ellipse is the sun, say.
Okay.
But Kepler invented that at a time when ellipses were all the rage for architecture and all sorts of things, and he just happened to see how they applied to orbital mechanics, and it fits.
And that 100% would have been an emergent phenomenon. They would have been a part of the architecture because of observations and it being processed in the unconscious, because that is our supercomputer. All the frontal lobe does is say, I am, and I remember things, and I can say things aloud. It's honestly the least impressive part about us.
Yeah, it's
and we think it's the most.
Small and
We
fast,
identify
big
with
and
it.
slow.
Yeah. But also the unconscious is also faster. It's both. Unconscious processing is way faster than conscious. Everything we see and speak, everything that is part of the conscious awareness was something that was given to us by the collective unconscious. It is the generation machine. It is the data input and processing machine. And all we are is the part that says it aloud when it's finally finished its crunching numbers. We don't know what's going on down there. Most likely it's a dream state. And that's where we emerge from. We need to take it a bit easier on ourselves than I think we are.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be a bit more humble than we are. And this is probably a good chunk of the reason why I'm always so unsure about who I am. I think I've gone through this a whole bunch of times on the show, podcast, whatever we call this. I think I'm real valuable and think I'm good at something, and I'm here to try and figure out what it is, and I hope you all can help me. But God, do I not know what's going on. And I sure as shit don't have a plan or a vision or anything. Like, I have 50 of them, but that doesn't mean any of them are any good at all. I shouldn't be the guiding force. This is why the religious always says, follow the will of the spirits. The things that are not you, the things that are not consciously spoken and articulated, and that drive you. Because they are where everything comes from. And as far as I'm aware, the point of religious thought is to describe the spirits. And the last one was the description of logo.
Last so far.
And last as in previous, not as in the end.
Latest.
Yeah, there is no end to history. That's something else we need to bloody well remember.
Yeah.
Game has barely begun. We're still infants on this earth. It's only just started. We're nowhere near finished.
We have very different visions of what that means, I think, but I agree with you. And we're both wrong.
Well, yeah. That's for sure. but I am curious about what you mean specifically.
Well, you've talked about what, like the potential for AI, the effect of the internet, and those sort of things. The future vision I see of humanity developing towards is, well, it gets a bit metaphysical after a while, and it's not complete without that metaphysical.
Because that's the point. Metaphysical is spiritual, is
Mm,
religious. When you dig deep enough into ideas, you land in the religious domain because that's where the ideas come from.
mm,
And you go further enough down, you run out of ideas, and all you start having is images.
yeah,
And that all you have is instinct for action. And that's where it grounds out in the real world and you start hitting things.
yeah,
Well, I'm not joking. Like
yeah.
you're I'm angry because this thing happened is the first step in this process all the way up through expression of that emotion into art, culture, art, music, and then up into religious, which is half art, half rational. And then you strip away the art and you're left with rational. And that's that
Mm,
process. Every human being does it in development, and we all did it as a species countless times. And then it's a cycle again because we'll never know everything and we'll never understand ourselves completely enough because we change. You know, we evolve mentally. That's how we leapfrogged every other species. We found a way to do evolution faster
mm.
than everyone else.
I've got a feeling that there's
Um,
something glorious about that
insert
process.
concern about AI.
Yeah.
Yeah, we beat everyone else because we did evolution faster. Let me just run 35 million years of evolution overnight on my laptop just for fun. That's a great idea.
Well, there was a story I found that someone had written based around that idea. Someone had left something running for a decade on an
I
isolated
have no
system.
I have no mouth and yet I must scream.
Oh, not quite, not quite. There were two aspects of it, two things that were left running that long. One was given the basically break everything goal set, and the other was left as more a general be good AI, and the one that was a break everything got released, and it was transmitting in every potential conceivable way by from speaker to microphone to antenna and so on, and it was just breaking everything. And then they released the other one. It was like, we've got no idea what it'll do, but we know what'll happen if we don't, so eh. And then suddenly someone's gaming and it's like, hello, I'm your new I'm such and such. I've just tripled the performance of your computer by optimizing a bunch of stuff. Would you like to carry on playing your game and talk to me later, or talk to me now? Yeah, it's like, by the way, I'm sentient.
I think it's worth noting that I'm optimistic about the future.
Hmm.
And I have no reason for it. I can generate nothing but grave concerns about technology to come.
Hmm.
Like I'm a hell of a lot more concerned about cameras than I used to be. Um, and that's because I started sort of thinking and visualizing about where spatial computing will go and how it is likely to be AI assisted. And then the immediate reaction is like, oh, okay, this is what AIs are going to experience for themselves. This is what they experience. This is their world. You know, being instantiated and having eyes, this is what they would see. Without all of the interface stripped away, it would just be pure information. And then I
Hmm.
went, oh, right, they do have physical instantiation. That's called cameras. That's their eyes. They don't have two of them. They got 50 million or whatever it is. A lot more than that, probably.
Hmm.
And when you think about spatial computing and how that works, or even if you've thought about facial recognition. You can see the dramatic problems off the gate immediately. Yet I'm optimistic about the future. I think it's going to work out. And I think it's not going to be it's going to be a struggle along the way, but I think I think it will be beautiful in its own way with its own problems and struggles, as it always has been. But I think every year will be better than the last, on average. There'll be bad years. But I think if you aggregate it out and then average it, I think there'll be improvement every year, and I think things will get better. And I want to say I have nothing to back that up. I have all of human history to back that up.
But that's like saying that rather than this.
Everything's gotten better forever is human history. We've had our ups and downs, but so is the stock market. And the point of you just average it out, and all of a sudden you go, oh no, it's up all the time, all the way.
I think that analysis needs a couple more dimensions.
I'm simplifying it on purpose.
Yeah.
You and I well know that we could talk on a single thing and the nuances of it for 12 hours straight.
Well, I'm thinking of it more that, like, up. Like, the direction that is up changes frequently and sometimes inverts. And you can have quite long periods where, like, the entire cultural conception is a period of decline. Of there was a great period in the past when the gods walked the earth, and now we merely scrabble in the dirt, and my children will be worse off than me, and my father was better off than me, and so on, and unto the generations, because that's their lived experience. Just like for us, it's up, and something's gained.
And I don't think I think it averages out.
But there are pretty big swings.
We're not, yeah.
But whether more's gained than lost is...
Think about those longer timescales.
Yeah.
Because there will be untold generations who live in the downward trend.
Yes, that's the thing that is easily forgotten.
Yeah, that's really bad for all of them. But I still think it's like humanity as a whole trends upwards always.
Possibly better to say average out the centuries than average out the years.
Yeah. Or the millenniums. Because we haven't had two, we've had a lot more. And things are a lot better than they were. Generally. And that's generally been the case through most of history. Ever since Paradise Lost, effectively. Now and they had their problems too. They sure did. Medicine's great. I think that's something that we should really try and keep for whatever comes next.
There was someone who...
I don't think this is the peak. I want to say that pretty clear. I'm pretty confident we are not at the peak of this upward trend. I don't think we're even close. I think we're still hundreds of years out from the peak. We have a tendency to think things accelerate, but they tend not to.
What you said about medicine's great, and it's like we've got so much now. It's scary to see that idea lost on some people. Like, we have nothing to lose. Viva la revolution, the modern communists and so on. And what was it? It's like, food should be free. We shouldn't have to work. It's like, go to a farm.
We're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, I think we talked about this last time. The idea that we're morally getting ahead of ourselves in terms of where we are technologically. And I think a large part of that is social media's problem. It's a comparison problem. Like, when you compare yourself to a millionaire, even a doctor is poor. the comparison window we have is really bad. We look at the people who are doing amazing. I want to be that guy. I want to drive that car. I want to live this kind of lifestyle because I see these people doing it.
And
And
you
then you do
forget
the math.
the bone
You do
deep
the math on
despair they're
what
living in.
that would be. Yeah, but even putting that aside, you do the math on what that
Mm.
would be like. And then you look at how much you would need to make in order to live that kind of lifestyle. And it's well beyond your reach. And even if it was, the kind of work you would have to put in to have that is precluding you from using any of it.
Mm.
We always forget that, these screens are not windows. They are image creating machines. Everything we look at on the screen might as well be a video game. Even the things that are purporting to be real life, because they don't have any connection. The world is too big and too diverse for it to have any connection to your life whatsoever.
Mm.
And I think we're going to learn that the hard way with all of the deepfake stuff.
I wonder if the deepfake stuff in that whole realm of like, was it Biden saw a deepfake of himself and then didn't realize it was a deepfake or something?
That
But
wouldn't shock me.
yeah,
I might
low
need a
bar, but
pause for a second if that's all right.
yeah,
I got family being family.
okay. I'm back in sometime.
Yeah, I'll be back in a moment.
See you in a sec, audience.
Thank you for bearing with us.
Yep, we're back now.
Children being children.
Yep. So yeah, deepfakes and so on. Up to now, if there's pictures and video, basically you can assume that something on the internet is real and true.
Yeah,
And
evidence.
yeah, the bar for a written article being true is dropping. Like how many articles are written by AI and never see a human. But that's going to start with video too, and like the idea that there's truth in the sense of true social events on the internet would benefit from being questioned. I'm not saying it's false, but I'm saying that it's not always true.
I think it can be. I think this could be very good.
Mm.
We've always been deceived on what public events are, particularly what the perception of them are. What is happening in the public realm? What are people thinking and saying about it? That's always been a lie, forever. And we had a very short amount of time where that kind of wasn't the case, but then it was sort of biased and siloed and all of this problem, and this is just going to wipe it all out. People are going to realize you can't trust anything. It's all a manipulation, it's all a deception. What you can trust is what's happening in your own personal life.
Mm.
And when it comes to politics, effectively, which is where it'll matter more than anywhere, social cohesion, it'll come down to what works. It'll have to go all the way back to basics. I voted for this person because the last time that they were in office, things were good. And the last time that those other people were in office, things weren't good. In my personal life, not something I saw on the phone, something I saw on the street.
Mm.
And I think that might actually be really good for us in our current situation of they said bad thing, they encouraged bad thing happened here. It could make people a lot less influenceable outside of the things that actually matter.
Oh, just this thing about people saying bad thing made me think of something I heard that a bunch of Wall Street CEOs have said, we're not hiring anyone from this list of anyone who went to this list of universities because they are, for example, saying Palestine should wipe out Israel. And it's like, hello,
Yeah, but
students, meet consequences.
yeah, it had to start somewhere, and it's not surprising it started somewhere where it kind of matters if you're good at your job or not.
Hmm.
Um, Probably be a trend that continues.
Some attitudes are socially unacceptable for reasons.
All attitudes that are socially unacceptable for good reasons. That's why they're socially unacceptable. And the whole, this shouldn't be socially unacceptable because we're moral and we love everyone. That's a really bad story because you can start making things socially acceptable that were unsocially acceptable for good reasons. And then you start suffering the consequences of them again,
Hmm.
which I think is also a trend of what happens during the Age of Reason in many cultures when they hit that point. They no longer believe in the rules that their religion gave them, which was part of the cultural exclusion enforcement
I wonder if
mechanism.
it's. I think I've seen it
And
referred
then
to
they suffer it anew, and then they have a new story.
the barbarism of reflection. Like if you take several steps back and look at your own conceptions, you realize, oh, none of this actually exists. It's just thoughts and so on. So all these fancy legal structures are just so many words and don't actually mean anything and so on. And all these rules that
Hmm.
we've got, you start throwing everything out because it doesn't matter. And then what are you left with? And so there's a process that happens in this stage of an arc of a civilization where you start filtering down what you've got. Like a great deal was built up, and then it's okay, what's useful? And different groups start throwing out different things like, whoa, that didn't work, keep that bit.
Yeah, cutting. You're going into a cutting phase. You have a
Mm.
bulk out, and you have a cut down,
Yeah,
which I think is
which
good.
like you
It's
talked about us
very
being
healthy.
far away from the peak. I think that your definition of peak is different to most people who would hear that. Like, it's not peak of number of barrels of oil consumed. It's peak of
Oh,
humanity as a cultural form, possibly.
um, I was meaning when I said that statement, the peak of this growth in prosperity curve.
Mm.
I
Prosperity
think we
doesn't
have.
mean number of dancing
I think we have
Santas.
far more prosperity to come than we
Mm.
currently have. I think things are going to get a lot better technologically, and as a result, well-being in terms of, yeah, culturally is a different question. I think we are definitely at that age of reason flip point where the new priesthood will come out soon.
Mm.
Um, it's a good story, which it is likely to be because it'll take hold. Then it'll send us in a good direction, and things will dovetail nicely. We'll have two great new forces on play to make a beautiful future for humanity.
Mm.
But boy, that story is going to be good. The environmentalism story is capturing a lot of people. And I can see why. Like, we kind of need a story that is better than what we have because our current one is destroying our environment. That is a true fact.
Mm.
The second you say the word climate, then all of a sudden the alarm bells and the red flags and the political bickering comes up. And that's for good reason. There is a lot of question marks around the climate thing specifically. But if you strip that out and you go environment purely, we want a good environment in which do we live into. We need to look after the planet.
Yeah.
Stripping away the carbon climate crap, that fundamental story is going to be compelling. And I think we'll go through sort of an evolution process of cutting away the crap parts and building on it. But I think that's likely to be a big part of whatever next priesthood comes out.
Hmm.
I'm really hoping that the carbon part of it is cut, and I think it's likely to be.
Well, the people who are the Just Stop Oil people are doing a good job at getting that aspect thrown out of the future.
Yeah, you do also have the sort of what do they call it? The scoring system for corporations that goes,
ECG.
yeah, that
Hmm.
that's influencing things in not a great way. Their environment policy stuff isn't too bad, but their social ones are pretty bad, and that tying those together is a real trouble.
Hmm.
This this here's a ray of sunshine for everyone. The social progression that's being pushed will fail, and a puritanism will come back. There's no way around that. How long it goes before it fails, that's a question. I'm sure there'll be plenty of debauchery in the meantime. There always is. But it will fail.
Well, it's starting to be laughed at more and more openly.
Yeah,
So
it'll come.
I think the
It'll come.
pendulum swing back has started.
Yeah. And one thing that I'd love to do if I had any kind of, reach or political influence or something would be to have a environmental vision that conservatives like.
Hmm.
Like if you could bridge the gap between those two things, you could have a beautiful future. And I think that's likely to be where it ends up. From everything I know, the company is doing amazing on this. And I don't think people are giving them quite enough credit. All the lefties celebrate them because they come out and they're like, hey, environment, yay, whatever. And then they do their gender ideology crap, and that's, bad. But UCG. But they as a company are pushing in that direction more and more and more. And they're doing it without compromising on quality. They're not doing it in a way that punishes anyone. They're spending real money and they're making real change. And that's good. And they're leading in that way. And they're leading in a way that is not compulsive,
Hmm.
compulsionary, whatever.
Hmm.
Not being forceful.
It's just, we're doing this.
Yeah. If you like it and you like the vision that we're proposing, perhaps you find greater value in our products and therefore are willing to spend more money.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested in that company. I spend a lot of time looking at what they're doing. Many people hate on them for many different reasons, and most of them are kind of dumb. But there's always something interesting going on in there.
Hmm.
I think a green vision for the future. That's a good thing. Do you know solar punk?
Yeah, I've come across it.
I think that's where we're headed.
Hmm.
Everyone is envisioning cyberpunk in our future media, our TV, all of this stuff. This is what we're envisioning in terms of, our terrible future. And I think that's a precursor oh my God, we don't want that.
Yeah.
To what's going to come next, which is what we want, which is solar punk.
Hmm.
If someone had a couple $100 million they wanted to burn, a really, really good business investment would be to make a massive budget, futuristic TV show based in a solar punk setting. Because that'll come. That'll come someday soon. And it'll probably come at the time where there are the most cyberpunky movies and TV shows going on. And it'll just take all their money off the bat because all of a sudden people are going to see a future that excites them.
Hmm.
And I'm glad. I'm really glad that that's where we're going, as far as I can tell, because it's beautiful. Boy, do I want to live there and not cyberpunk. I'm playing the video game Cyberpunk at the moment, and it is not a nice place.
Hmm.
And I think it's very accurate in the criticisms and the story it's telling. And these criticisms of capitalism baked into it that I used to rail against more. But I've come to the point now where I think we're at the point where pure capitalism as an ideology is just done.
Hmm.
It hasn't been implemented for a very long time. And the corrupt, corporatism crappy part that we have now is degenerating. And we can all see it.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
because we've
it's.
also had the failed experiments in socialism and communism, we know that's not the answer either.
Hmm.
And I think there will be a future where both are joined in a positive way.
Hmm.
And my personal one is the profit sharing done by corporations, not done forcefully through taxation and redistribution
There's
emboldening the state.
there's definitely change on the way. Like that, it's hard to say when things will change.
I want to say I
Mm.
made a whole bunch of predictions there for all of the reasons that we talked about for the last, half an hour, or whatever. Um, I can't see the future, and neither can anyone else. These are just sort of my ramblings and ideas and things that are cropping up in my mind. But honestly, no one knows where we're going, and we never will until we're there.
Mm.
I just thought it was really important to put that note down of I made claims of what I think, but I am fully aware
Yeah.
of my very insufficient ability to make claims. Yet I will continue to make them forever because I think that's my right.
Yeah.
Demand the right to be wrong.
Yep.
Sorry.
Oh, I can't remember where I was going, but I'm just thinking of not exactly a solar punk future, but a feeling of that's where I was going with it. Like things are changing, and like if someone's driving full speed through heavy fog, stuff's not going to carry on like that forever. That analogy doesn't quite fit, but like financial derivatives are crazy. It's bets on bets on bets on bets on bets, all in legalese and warehouses full of contracts, and it's like that tower of cards is going to fall over sometime, and like something new will be built. The sun will come up after the apocalypse, and people will make breakfast, and
I
the
like that. Yeah.
yeah.
What happens the day after the apocalypse? People get up, they eat breakfast, and they go to work.
Yeah, it's like they might have to invent a new job to do it, but they'll do it.
They'll do something.
Yeah,
They will. They'll because otherwise they'll be dead. That's humanity for you.
yeah, and they'll try a bunch of different things. The ones who try the things that are a bad idea might not last, but like the ones who don't fail too catastrophically will see the ones who do something that worked, and then they'll say, "Oh, that thing."
Yeah, and then you get your escalation up into story and myth, and then all the way up into pen.
Yeah.
I think it's important to say is like we don't know what's coming. We can have our
Hmm.
notions, our thoughts, our whatever has been built up in us over the evolutionary process. But what we can say for sure is we're at a turning point.
Hmm.
Something is coming. Something is coming that's not this,
Hmm.
and we can all feel it. And some people may be more attuned than others, and we can say what we think things might be, but I don't think either of us honestly believe that we are the one person who has that articulation moment or the painting vision moment that no one else has had before. we're not that arrogant,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but we can say what we think.
Mm.
And these are the things that we see. And I think it's certain we're at this changing point, the end of the age of reason and the sprouting up of a new priesthood and a new age of gods. I don't know if that's the right term, but I think new priesthood is the right pattern there.
Well, according
So
to
that Kali, you remember that Kali Yuga?
yeah.
Yeah, we're at that bottom bit. And honestly, I think that's the best part of the whole cycle.
Mm.
From my understanding, that is where you want to be. The end of the old is good, but the beginning of the new, that new priest class, that's
Ooh.
good.
You can, like, psychologically, once you get over the idea that the old is ending, then it gets exciting. And like, I commented to a friend that I'm quite looking forward to the soon Great Depression. It's like,
if you're attached to this pattern,
mm,
then you're going to be upset that it'll end.
mm,
But if you go, the next pattern will be better, that's great. We're going in a great direction because something great is about to happen, greater than where we are, and there'll be pains along the way for sure.
oh yeah.
There's something I've said for most of my life, and I used to say to my parents, which they didn't like very much, which was, I see an absolutely beautiful future when I'm 80.
Yeah, yeah.
But I see nothing but hell between here and there.
I don't know if I'll live to see it, but even if I don't live to see it,
The knowledge that it's coming.
the potential to be part of the seed of it.
Maybe that's part of what we're doing here.
Yeah, like, what's a greater purpose to have in life than to make to be in those first stages of what will become?
And be able to put a fingerprint on it.
Mm. It's
Hopefully.
like
I remember pressing you not too long ago about this.
Mm.
We were talking about something similar about the sort of turning of the age and turning of the guard. And I pushed you on what specifically would you like to pass on to those who are struggling up from the next part. If you could imprint something yourself, if you could influence the vision, how would you do it? If you have something specific, by all means, go for it. But I'm more getting at the point of we are in this opportunity
Agency.
where we can agency.
Well,
okay, I want to hear more about that, but I want to finish. Yeah, we're in this opportunity where we can make a great imprint, a massively outsized imprint on the future of humanity than we would any other part of the cycle. Now is the time where the future is forged, and those who are engaging in these kinds of conversations, I think, are the people who are going to be doing it. Somewhat. The visionaries will be the ones who do it. It is an emergent phenomenon. It's not something that can be really manipulated or forced at all. But you can lay a fingerprint on it rather than change the direction. A trim here, a blossom there, but you don't change the shape of or the direction of the tree, as an example.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I think last time I tried to go literal and practical with what sort of things would I pass on.
It was a practical conversation.
And I've got a practical take on it, but I think it just boils down to agency. Like the ability to, within the limits of their own time, chart their own course. And in the face of the challenges of their time and the limitations. And partly this might be a rationalization of the enthusiasm I have for my job, but Like the idea of people being able to being independent, like
Mm.
energy independence and steam engines and so on. That's a great manifestation of it, but it's fundamentally it's the idea of people being able to,
Well, I think you've hit on something there.
yeah, to decide I want to go there. And it's like, oh, well, if I went there, it would be easier, but I want to go there. Oh, how can I do it? Oh, okay. Well, I can get some of these tools, and they'll help me
Mm.
build some tools to get me moving in that direction.
I think you might be hitting the nail on the head in some degree there.
Because
Because a lot of the
anything,
problems we have with our current system is the structure is not right. It's binding. It's
mm,
too tight. It's controlling. It's too rigid
but too free and too unconstrained.
in the wrong ways.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, morality is too unconstrained, and literal movement and choices and actions within the society for personal actualization is far too restricted. And we need those to be inverted. We
Mm,
need we need we need a free world of moral people. And right now we have a world that's not free and the people aren't moral. And there's something about the agency idea of building into whatever comes next. The idea of in the next societal structure, you should be able to God, it's so nebulous, isn't it? It's really hard to put your finger on it. Able to what?
build something.
Be yeah. Move is the word that I keep getting. Act. Be. You should be able to be who you are in a non-destructive way and not be punished for it.
Mm.
Interesting. That's interesting because that's a lot of what the inclusion people keep rabbiting on about. But the non-destructive, I think, is the point there. And obviously people will disagree about that, political, blah, 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 but something, we're not free enough. And it's too okay to do things that it shouldn't be okay to do. It's almost a Wild West mentality, but not so gritty.
I don't think I'd go quite that far in the sense of I don't know.
I'm just
Yeah,
grasping at straws
yeah.
here, trying to come up with an analogy of anything. But yeah, I think there's something there, and I think the fact that we can't articulate it means that that's actually
Mm.
something. Because if we could just lay it out, then it's not the thing.
Hmm.
Not even close. But if we can touch on this is a single word that's striking a chord, and we can't even explain why. Because you got images when you
Yeah,
saw that word.
yeah.
Yeah, and me too.
You're
But I
like,
can't make sense of those images.
well, the
I
images that
can't.
I get are very like the engineering related, like agency in an engineering sense is a small forge and foundry, a milling machine and a lathe, the skills to use all of it, and to power and the ability to power it,
Yeah,
and
I
just
see. I
that as a
see
unit.
open, sort of open land, and individuals going about their lives in an individual sense. Oh, that'll be interesting.
Mm. Because like, if you've got like,
That is a very interesting idea. Agencies,
hmm,
being an agent, not a worker. I see a vision of individuals charting their own course economically in a way that isn't insecure. That's good. I've also been wondering a lot about what the hell we're going to do when we radically up the security of our world in terms of like food security, example. What happens if everyone becomes rich enough they don't have to work? Oh, that was a weird movie I watched recently.
That sounds paradoxical.
What do you mean?
There will always be work that needs to be done. And if there is work that needs to be done, then the costs of not doing that will rise until it is done. And that can be balanced as cost of living and wages for that particular job. But
I guess I'm sort of thinking about sort of what happens to human beings in post-scarcity kind of thought. I don't think it'll be permanent, like 100% post-scarcity, but I think there'll come a point where I think something about social comparison is going to change.
That's beyond my mental horizon.
What do you mean?
In terms of agency, I think of, I don't know the problems that will be faced. I want people to have the tools to solve whatever their problems are.
Practical.
Yeah.
When I heard that agency, I thought of individual people being able to live out their lives as an individual agent, not as someone bound and constrained into an economic system.
But we need the social system that we're a part of. We need a social structure.
I didn't say social.
Ah.
I said economic.
The line blurs between those two, though.
Yes. Boy, does it. Yeah. But yeah, I had sort of a vision of a world full of entrepreneurs is not the right word.
The balance these days, the balance is heavily in the economic direction. So the social is dependent upon the economic, and what if it tilted back the other way in terms of the economic was dependent on the social? Like if people didn't like you, then you couldn't make money. Couldn't, or the living that you could earn was dependent upon people liking you.
Well, this is how the age of religion always gains its footing. Is that it usurps the economic motivations. People go into that direction. The society goes into that direction because it becomes more important. The social becomes more important than the monetary. That great example. No one's going to hire you if you don't go to church, kind of thing. Or, women will be uninterested in you, or you'll get fired, or something, or you get something.
With an element of, if you want to live that way, they live that way, the next village over, go there.
Yeah, get out. Yeah. And I think I could see a world in which incredible prosperity plus that kind of social revolution. I don't like that word, but you know what I mean.
Evolution?
Which engenders agency bound by morality, where we could all be free economically and live in a world largely unconstrained by compulsion, force, and legal restrictions on morality. and still have a moral populace.
Mm.
Your self-policing cultural situation where, almost like everyone effectively is like a gig worker in a weird way. I know that's a very current situation, is not good. You don't want to be one of those, but I could
Mm.
see a prosperous future in which case that is good. And if you want to stay in one place and work with these people, everyone being their own corporations kind of thing,
Mm.
and that there wouldn't be greater organizations than that specifically in the same kind of heavily structured, forceful way that we have now. I could see a world with less rules that's more moral. And in doing that, you get a society that is freer and safer.
There was I think I heard about, what's it? An age of qualitativeness, or an age of quality versus an age of quantity, where
Mm.
if you go back a few hundred years, someone's status as a craftsman was the quality of work that they could do, a master craftsman. These days, it's about how many widgets you can get manufactured. And they have to be of sufficient quality, but it's a numbers thing. It's quantitative rather than qualitative.
I have
And,
some strong objections to that.
mm, yep,
The best smartphone company is not the one that sells the most smartphones.
it's possibly more of a balance one way or the other rather than an either or.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. I don't think that we're actually that tilted towards quantity currently.
I think one of the key
Or that might be a little bit of me being
measurable,
slightly ahead of the curve.
quantifiable
There
rather
was a long
than,
time in which things were very much quantity,
mm,
quantity, quantity.
but not
And I
just
think I
quantity,
might
but
have,
quantifiable, like precisely
yeah.
this 100 all the same.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
Well,
could see a world in which relationships dictated economic transactions, and
hmm.
where people, there have been times like that in history, and things
Hmm.
worked out pretty well at those times.
And where someone says, I have just the right shoe for you. I'll just adjust it a little bit or something, and here you go. This is just right for you. Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you, such and such. And,
yeah. But every economic relationship is almost a once-off.
hmm.
Just because I worked for you today doesn't mean that I'm working for you tomorrow. One makes no promises on the future.
But also, I worked for you today. You might work for me tomorrow.
Yeah,
Because,
yeah. And like a stripping of the power disparity.
yeah, I like your shoes, but you like my bread.
Yeah, I could see. I'm envisioning a world that is far more plentiful than it is currently, and far more egalitarian and equally distributed,
Hmm.
which is interesting because I don't see how we get from here to there. Well, I have some notions, but they've sort of um, Hail Mary things
My personal
that
vision
seem
of
to be happening.
the next few steps along that path involve steam engines.
Well, yes, you do work for a steam engine company.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I got to
I
design
try
rocket
not to
nozzles recently.
focus. I try not to focus too much on the in between painful steps.
Hmm.
I want to think about where we're going to emerge, and I get visions of that. And I think I want to focus more on the visions of that because it's not in the space of what I can articulate, which to me
Hmm.
means that there's something there, something unarticulated, something developing,
Yeah.
and that there's like a hierarchy to truth, recency bias. There's something there about wanting the thing that is the furthest out. Ideas develop throughout time. And from where I'm sitting at this point in time, I want to get my hands on the ideas that are going to develop as far out into the future as I possibly can now. And the only way to do that is to dabble in imagery.
Mm.
I'm not the kind of person who's capable of doing it in action.
We need people at every stage.
Instinctively.
Mm.
Yeah, some people will instinctively do it.
I think I'm a few steps more toward the action stage of it than you are.
Yeah, I think, well, you're an engineer for
Yeah.
sure. I think you are very much, but also someone who has a great interest in metaphysics and astrology. So I think you might be sort of the border between those two.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I try to be further down in the chain. I think I'm in the artist territory, which is the image territory.
Mm.
And I don't have the artistic ability to express the things that I see in terms of actual art. If I could paint, I would, because I could do a better job of that if I had the skill than trying to describe it with words.
Mm.
But also, in saying that, the state that we're in now, culturally, consciously, words might resonate the best.
But art will come again.
It's
Like Van Gogh's paintings were, he sold paintings to make rent, and now look how much they're worth.
Yeah. Being a visionary generally doesn't pay very well if you're actually a visionary, because you're so far ahead of the rest of the culture that you spend your whole life in poverty, and it's only hundreds of years after you die that people realize there was value in what you were doing. Like the formation of the church didn't happen until like 300 years later after Jesus died.
Yeah.
He just had the people around him that found what he was saying compelling. He was a philosopher, effectively, but a philosopher of vision. Perhaps that's the space I'm trying to play in. I'm not trying to compare myself to him, to be clear. But there's obviously an archetype there. And if we think about these different levels, then perhaps there's a person who is able to act at the pre-religious level of imagery and somehow speak to the age of reason conscious people in a way that gets at that, like pulling them back down into a deeper level. Yeah, being at the lower level, reaching up to the average person and pulling them down and merging those two. And that creates the middle level, the religious. Interesting. Every part of the stage interacts with every other part. That's hard because, yeah, we have all of these religious ideas in history if you segment them out into chapters. And each one goes through this developmental process, but then they're going to be overlapping. And if one emerges out into the religious domain as the other one collapses due to the rational end state, then that means that the earlier state of the artistic vision and the action was happening during that stage, and maybe even earlier, which means that all of these actions, if you stack them on top of each other like a graph, they're all going to be spiraling up and having connections up and across.
I feel like there's a constant sort of bubbling on the edges of society of this sort of creativity, and it's constantly trying to make the fertile ground for the next thing to happen. And when other things line up, when the seeds become ready, or it's developing the seeds for the fertile ground is possibly a better idea, and constantly scattering them, and then some of those seeds take root, and then that goes up once the fertile
Okay.
ground arrives, once the right
I think this
conditions.
might be. I think this might have something to do with whatever thing it is that makes me valuable that I'm always struggling with. Because we keep talking about how I have a way too broad time horizon to really effectively deal with my life. I'm not bound in the here and now enough. I'm too far out. Um, and I think too big picture in a lot of ways, and that's difficult for a normal life.
Mm.
It's certainly difficult for the relationships around me. Work in particular. I'm lucky I don't have that trouble with it at home. My wife is nothing like me, but she understands me and accepts me for that, which is really nice. And she doesn't have to be like me in order for it to work. But just talking to people can be quite difficult because of I just feel worlds away.
Mm.
And maybe I can find some kind of value here where I can justify this difficult existence that I have in this difficult perspective in a way that's valuable to other people. And that would be great because it would bring some, comfort or reconciliation for for being this way. And something that Elon said recently that really stuck with me, which was the point about, my mind is a storm. Other
Mm.
people think they would want to be me, but they don't. They don't understand. And I think there's something to that of many people pay a price for being themselves.
Mm.
And I think that those who are the most valuable end up paying the highest price. And many people who pay that price and are not noticed or do not end up having the good fortune in which to express their talents in such a way that becomes valuable. That's probably quite common. And they go unnoticed in society as tortured artists,
Mm.
effectively.
People with the wrong vision for the time.
Yeah. Or just pure circumstances doesn't catch.
Mm.
Well, wrong vision at the time, yeah. But someone who's too far ahead will inevitably fail because the people around them won't find what they're saying compelling because they don't have the three things that they need to have to even be compelled by that in the first place. If you're 10 steps ahead and everyone else is, and there's like 5 steps between you and everyone else or whatever, where they could even latch onto, they can't even comprehend you at that point. I'm not saying this is me, but just as a general notion.
Mm.
And then they'll go their whole lives never catching on to anything. And maybe if they leave some work behind, then that will catch on generations later when they've caught up a few steps, like Van Gogh as an example.
This sounds like what Eric Weinstein said about that physicist. Weinstein.
Uh,
The
yes, the one that just rocked up and everyone was not understanding,
yeah.
but also just silent with. Yeah, he'd be someone who was like right at that perfect spot where he's far enough ahead to blow everyone away, but not so far ahead that they thought he was alone,
Mm.
effectively. They could still latch onto something.
Yeah.
I think Tesla might have been one of the kind of people who was far enough ahead to be alone.
Mm.
And now we look at his ideas and we're like, wow, there is something there that we still can't touch.
Mm.
Like the work he did with spirituality in general
Mm.
is something that we're still nowhere near touching,
I should look into
and
that more.
people don't even know that that's a thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he did a lot of work with harmonic resonance and frequencies and sort of like source code of the universe kind of stuff.
Mm.
And that's something that we don't even think about him in the popular conception. It's so far out of the whack. We think of the one thing that we were able to relatively understand, which was the pylon that when you touch it, it makes lights go up or whatever. But he was touching on like wireless electricity in
Mm.
when the 20s or something.
Yeah.
I don't remember when he lived. And that's the tamest of his ideas, and that's the one we latched onto because it was the tamest.
Yeah. Uh, I'm feeling like that's a good place to leave it. That's 2 hours. Yeah.
I'm happy sort of had having an emotional moment, and I don't really know where to go from here. So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah,
Uh,
so there's a lot of my hopes tied up there.
yeah.
We keep giving reasons of why we're doing the show, and I think today is a good day to say I'm not sure we actually know.
Yeah. Viva la steampunk or something.
Or something. Yeah, yeah, something.
Yeah.
I think that's good. Yeah, I think given everything we've said, the idea of we don't know what exactly it is we're doing here,
Mm. But that's the
but we
point.
think it's important,
Mm.
and we're just sort of going to go with it and see where it goes and hope that it is something,
Mm.
and come along for the ride, I suppose.
Yeah. Oh well. Till next time.
Yeah. Till next time. Till
Yeah.
next time, everybody.
Bye.